and welcome to Hitting the Bar, the football podcast. We are back, and I'm Chris Karle.
And I'm Geoff Saunders.
Well, Geoff, we've been off air, I suppose is the way to put it, for a little while, thanks to the coronavirus and all that and the lockdown.
At least we haven't lost any matches in the past 10 weeks.
No, it's been Tottenham's best unbeaten run for a long time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this carrying on, but, we'll see.
Presumably, and we are expecting the Premier League to come back at some time in June, but there has the first thing I want to talk about is because there has been some talk of this finishing the season without playing any more games and having this average points where basically they tot up how many points and then how many games left. Or the other alternative is weighted points home and away, which in West Ham's case might make a difference because under both scenarios, though, you may be relegated.
Yeah. And the reason for these complicated arrangements is UEFA have said that if a league stops early, then there must be a completely fair and understandable means of deciding positions based on football. So, number of points per match so far, blah blah blah. Right? Okay. So that's UEFA. However, it's not a problem at the top in any league that's trying to do this. The problem, of course, is at the bottom, where teams will be relegated with 10 games left to play. Yeah.
Well, we're going to have a look at that in depth in a moment. But shall we start off the show with your trivia question?
Okay. Since the 1964-65 season in the Dutch league, every team that has won the league in that period has something in common. What is it?
All right, intriguing. We shall find out what that is at the end of the show. So back to the connotations and permutations, I suppose, of these different ways of calculating who wins the title, Liverpool, and who stays up, who goes down, who gets a European place. I was talking on, obviously remotely, to a friend of ours, Kirk Blows, who is, like yourself, a West Ham fan and also journalist, writer about West Ham, and he says that either way is unfair, and I do agree with him, because it depends on what run-in you've got.
Absolutely.
West Ham have got some relatively easy games coming up. They've already had the hard ones.
Yes.
So giving the average points is giving the average points on the hard games.
Yeah, absolutely right. There is no way of doing this fairly, in inverted commas. It can't be done. The reason why the league matters is that everybody plays everybody else twice, home and away. So, as you say, and to take that, there's a very specific problem in France at the moment, where Amiens, who've just been relegated, the French league decided to close in April 24th. They decided to shut down the season, which most people think is much too early. There were 10 games left to play, and that meant that Amiens have been relegated. Now, it's a historical fact that for the last 5 years, Amiens' best results have come in the last 10 games of the season.
Oh, really?
They're a brilliant team at the end. Their promotions, they've come up 3 divisions, their promotions were all earned in the last 10 weeks of each season. So, okay, PSG are going to win the French league, everybody knows that.
Yeah, we knew that. We knew that back in September.
Okay, now, the reason why this is particularly bad in France is that they've done away with their version of the League Cup, the French League Cup. So there is actually space next season to have 2 teams promoted, no teams relegated, and they will still only play the same number of games as they would have played the season before. And Amiens are saying, well, why couldn't you do that?
That sounds
very sort of sensible to me.
That does sound fairer, actually, yes, I have to agree. And you'd prefer that with West Ham, I suppose?
Well, definitely, yeah.
But what about, they are going to, if they don't go for those 2 options of weighing up the average points and all that, what about then the idea of playing behind closed doors? Is that fair? Because to me it seems like that gives Manchester City and Arsenal an unfair advantage.
Why? Because it's no different.
Because it's no different, there's nobody there. Germany have been doing it. There are some games that we'll talk about in a moment. Germany have been doing it without any fans there. It kind of occurred to me watching some highlights the other day. Does it, because players are obviously very public figures, celebrities if you like, and they, like musicians I suppose or whatever, or actors on a stage, kind of thrive and perform through the support. So it's a bit like a training match. You've watched a bit of the German games, have you? I mean, has it made any difference?
Well, in the first match, it was very different. It was like training matches, almost everyone.
That was what I meant, yeah.
But the second ones and the third one, no, they're just back to normal.
So they got used to it.
Oh yeah. And yesterday's match, last night's match between between Dortmund and Bayern. Dortmund had obviously got recordings of the crowd, and they were playing them over the tannoy.
Oh, really?
So it sounded as if it was the same, exactly the same.
Is that fair then to the away team?
Well, I don't know.
Because I mean, there was a team in the South Korean league team that got fined a couple of £100,000, I think, equivalent thereof, for putting sex dolls in the seats in the stands to replicate. I mean, the whole thing's been blown out of all proportion, obviously.
Oh dear.
They've let themselves down. But however, they got fined a substantial amount of money for putting these sex dolls in the stand. Now, pornography is actually banned in South Korea, so I don't know how they managed that. But they were trying to kind of replicate the atmosphere, but I think probably playing chanting over the tannoy is a better way to go.
Well, I think so. I mean, Bayern could not complain that they're under any sort of disadvantage, could they? I mean, no, why would they be?
I suppose, yeah. I just, there's no sound of the away fans. It's just obviously Dortmund fans or whatever on the recording. But it's a good idea. It does at least give a bit of atmosphere.
Well, yeah, and
also when you're watching at home, because that's all you can do now. It was quite funny yesterday. I was following on Twitter Gary Lineker, of course, who, if you don't follow him on Twitter, is very funny. He was watching it. He posted a little video clip. Yesterday's game, I think. It was an early game, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah.
And he posted a little clip of a player there was a handball in the area. Player was on the floor, but handball punched the ball away. And he's going, VAR, VAR. And I thought that's really weird because there's like silence in the stadium. It looks like a training match, and you've got Gary Lineker watching remotely going, why is there no VAR? So it's a kind of weird combination of what it used to be like and this sort of, I don't know, eerie kind of ghost town feel to it.
Yeah, what was very clear was the TV camera operators are obviously under instructions to try not to show the stands. But you saw lots of the pitch, but very few things of the stands.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so with the sound being, you actually wouldn't have known unless you knew.
Wow. Okay, so they are a lot of games. I think Premier League games, at least, are going to be shown for free in Britain, at least. Or that's what they are suggesting.
I think that's what they are suggesting. Yes.
That doesn't mean it'll happen.
No,
as we know with these things. However, of course, a lot of people have already paid for their tickets, season ticket holders. We don't know if they're going to get their money back or how that's going to work, but we do think that's the best way to go, is to play behind closed doors and get the season finished.
Absolutely, it should be done on the pitch. Yeah, it's there is no question that Liverpool are going to win the league, but the relegation decisions are up for grabs, so they should be played.
And what happens with Liverpool's? Normally you go on an open top bus tour of the city, don't you? But you can't do that, I suppose.
Well, I don't know. They're more than 2 meters away from everyone.
That's why they're up on the top of a bus. Yeah, the crowd not so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. Let them play in closed stadiums. That will start. I think is it middle of June.
Middle of June, yeah.
10 games to go for most teams. Yeah. Plus we've still got the FA Cup to get through. Plus all those Champions League games. What does that mean then for next season, which is supposed to start in the middle of August?
Well, I think they just got to say, well, you've had your between season break already.
Yes.
You just carry on.
Yeah, I suppose you've had 3 months off already. Yeah. So it'll just mean that instead of 38 games, it'll be like a 48 game season. There might be a week or something. Yeah.
Why not?
Actually, yeah, I think you're probably right. That's probably the best way to go about it. Right. So Germany then. So
yeah, I think German league is all over now, isn't it? It's Bayern 7 points ahead with 8 games or something left. That's all over now.
That's a foregone conclusion, or whatever you call it.
And just interesting stat which came out last night. Lewandowski has scored 41 goals this season. 41. And so has Haaland, by the way.
Oh yeah,
both on 41. The kid is on 41 goals. It's amazing.
Ridiculous. I mean, we praised him way back. Can't remember last time we did this show, and many episodes before. We've been talking about this wonder kid Haaland and how he missed out, or he didn't miss out. Man United missed out on signing him at the beginning of the season, whenever it was, and he's gone on and he's just absolutely on fire.
Absolutely, he just looks he's a once in a generation player. I think. I mean, the real deal. He's just amazing, and he has no fear at all. It's if you remember Michael Owen when he was 18, before he decided it was all very difficult. And
too hard.
Yeah, it was just he's just playing like he would with his with his mates.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
the freedom of
yeah.
the freedom of not having that pressure on you.
Yeah.
Well, not believing in your own hype, I suppose, and just having fun with it. Talking of once in a generation, it's actually Paul Gascoigne's birthday today.
Oh, is it?
Happy birthday, Gazza!
Happy birthday!
Can't believe you're still with us. Well done. What a great player! What a great player!
Phenomenal player.
Sensational.
Yeah. Not just at football as well. I don't know if you saw a documentary that he did many years ago when he was still in his pomp. Any ball game, any game that involves a ball, he was brilliant at.
Yeah, golf even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Table tennis, pool. Don't take him on in any game that involves a ball. You will lose.
Incredible, isn't it? Just a natural, almost sort of born with that gift.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, then let's carry on with what's been happening in England, in football in England. Your favourite team, Newcastle United.
The Jongleurs.
Jongleurs, yeah. Somehow still in the Premier League and somehow occasionally being taken seriously.
Yeah.
There's a long saga has been going on for a long time of being bought out by a Saudi prince and all that sort of talk of, will that mean they've got blood on their hands? Will he make them Champions League contenders and all that? That's been quite protracted, but you've been keeping up to date with that.
Yeah, there's a very real chance now that it won't go ahead because the particular prince who is actually the head of Saudi Arabia, who is the head of the investment fund that is buying Newcastle, is also the chairman of this company that is pirating football videos.
Right.
There is the company based in Qatar, Be In.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this Saudi Arabian company called Be Out.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh,
and it has cost the European broadcasters hundreds of millions of pounds, and they've gone to court to the WTO, the World Trade Organization, who have found against them in criminal proceedings, which means, according to Premier League rules, they're not fit.
Wow.
So the deal might be off, but we know the Premier League and money rules. So are they prepared to turn a blind eye to this, bearing in mind that it's their sponsors, the people who give them the money, who brought the case in the first place?
What a dilemma.
Yes,
what a dilemma. There was a rumour yesterday, has been for a week or so, that Mauricio Pochettino, my team Tottenham's former manager, may be tempted to go to, I can't imagine him being tempted, but certainly offered the Newcastle position. That might have been this takeover had gone through.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't think he'd be interested in, with all due respect, which I don't have, to Mike Ashley, I don't think Pochettino would have gone there because he would have wanted investment in players and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're a dreadful team, and he certainly wouldn't have taken the team he's got and built on that.
No. I mean, the success with that group of players is staying in the Premier League.
Yeah, that's below what Pochettino is capable of.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, he's a better manager than keeping a team up.
Yes.
That's not what he's about.
No.
And I would not be happy, not because it would be competition, but I would feel sorry for Pochettino if he ended up at Newcastle. I think he was saying in an interview earlier this year that he expected to take over from Jose at Real Madrid. Those were his expectations at one point. So obviously Newcastle is not quite the level that you'd expect to see him at.
No, that's quite right. And the Real Madrid job and the Barcelona job will both be coming vacant fairly soon. Obviously, he won't go to Barcelona. That would never happen. But Real Madrid is a very real possibility. And in fact, Real Madrid would be stupid not to offer it to him, to be honest.
You'd think so, yeah. Well, Spanish football also due to start.
Yeah.
Another league that is a foregone conclusion. So we don't see any change at the top in Spain.
I don't think so, no.
I just want to touch on this a little bit, because if West Ham gets sent down without kicking another ball in anger before the end of the season, would they be in their rights to, because you mentioned before about teams suing,
yeah.
Would West Ham go through that route, do you think?
I think they'd have to, wouldn't they? I mean, being in the Premier League is worth so much money. We're talking about tens of millions a year. It is everything, isn't it? So, arguably, if they were a public company, then they'd be, sort of guilty of not doing so. They must do. They have to. And, there are 3 cases going through the French courts at the moment against the French Football League for teams being relegated, Amiens being the the big one because they're relegated from the French Premier League. Barnsley are saying they will go to court if they are relegated, and any team has got to. We can forget about them being teams and forget about them being football. Is business.
It is. Well, it is business.
And they're being denied money, and the competition has been cut short. And not only should they go to court, but I can't see a court ruling against them.
Well, that's very interesting, because that kind of reminds me of another point that happened when the lockdown started, I suppose. And there was a great clamour of people saying that footballers, and Tottenham were one of the teams that resisted it for a while and got themselves a little bit of a bad rep, but the footballers should take a 25-30% pay cut in order to pay the rest of the staff, the proverbial tea lady, the bootlace guy, the kit man and all that. And again, to quote Gary Lineker on Twitter, he said, I understand why people are saying footballers should take a pay cut. They are very highly paid. But why are they being singled out? In that case, the owner of Wetherspoons, the owner of JD Sports, investors, all these wealth managers, all these people on hundreds of thousands a week, should also then be taking a pay cut. Why are you singling out footballers?
He's absolutely right. The key word in what you initially said was should. Now, I think that if a solution was found that was seen to be fair, an awful lot of footballers in the Premier League would do that. But they're quite right to resist being forced to. They're quite right to resist.
Yeah, I do agree with that. My views on riches and how they should be spent may be a little bit, shall we say, snowflakey. But it is entirely their choice, first of all. And why are they being singled out, in this, my opinion, why are they being singled out, secondly, and then forced into a situation where they've got their own union, by the way. They are workers, after all. They are employed by the club. You've got the owners of various teams, like Tottenham, sitting on his own island, self-isolating on his yacht or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't see him paying into the kitty.
Yeah, and I didn't see anything in the back pages of the newspapers about the owners coming up with the money.
No, exactly.
And they're the ones who earn the most money out of all of this by a long, long way.
A lot of footballers are very well known for doing a lot of charitable work. A lot of footballers have been, doing necessary work in the community, handing out free meals, giving their money as well, quite voluntarily, quite willingly. But this idea, as Gary Lineker said, that you should make an example of footballers and force them into it.
Well, yes, and there is one other thing. Lineker is completely right. I mean, you can't argue with what he's saying. But the football industry in the UK is actually a very small industry. It's a very public one.
Yes.
It's sort of the back 20 pages of our newspapers, but it's a very small industry. Let's be honest about this. And for most clubs outside of the Premier League are loss-making. A lot of them are probably going to go bust because of this.
Yes.
The idea of a 92 league, that's gone. That is gone. And it maybe should have happened before. Maybe we should have gone to semi-professional regional leagues, many years ago. But if this forces that to happen, I think it can only be good. And the footballers themselves won't earn any less money, I don't think. But anyway, that's football is relative to the UK economy a very, very small business.
Actually, that's a point that I think, because it is so public, as you say, because it is so much in our public eye, and footballers are the new rock and roll, and there's all this money floating about, people do get this skewed idea that football is very important financially. But actually, it's only important within itself in many ways.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a very small part, as you say, of the economy. But back to... we have discussed this before. I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody like Gary Lineker, a football mind, if you like. Somebody in the industry last year said that England is not big enough to contain 92 professional clubs.
Of course it's not, no.
And I think we've discussed it before, but maybe this is a sort of, nasty as it is, a cull, in a way.
Okay, look at United States. What have they got? 300 million people?
Yep. And
their football teams, 32 professional football teams for 300 million people.
Yeah. But it's not as popular there, of course. I mean, you've got to take that into account, but still, yeah.
Yeah, but it's all they're saying is we will expand the league if someone comes with a business case that proves they'll fill the stadiums every week.
Like David Beckham with his Real Miami, possibly.
Inter Miami.
Inter Miami, isn't it? Yeah, Inter Miami.
So, and their stadium's going to have what, 20,000 capacity?
Yeah. It's not like Dortmund or whatever getting 70,000.
70,000.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
They got 20,000 in the stand behind the goal, haven't they?
Yes. That's another thing. Actually, talking of finances, it costs almost nothing to go and see Dortmund compared to to see Chelsea or even West Ham.
Yeah, absolutely.
70 quid a ticket to go and see West Ham or Tottenham.
Yeah, it's about 25 euros.
25 euros. It's £20 or I mean, to go and see Dortmund in a stadium, a vibrant stadium, before this anyway, of 70-odd thousand. But you're right, in America it is only 20-odd thousand, I suppose. But I don't think, you're right, I think you're right. Maybe 92 fully professional clubs is just too much.
It's just too many. It's been too many for a very, very long time.
Yeah, but I mean, back to the point though, footballers should not really be forced into giving up their money to pay for the other staff. Well, as I said, Joe Lewis is sat on an island in the Caribbean.
I think we're in an extraordinary position where anybody could think that it's right that anybody who is employed should be forced to give up. It's their job. It's their livelihood. Now, okay, so they earn a lot of money. Well, so what?
Well, yeah, so what? I mean, you don't see hedge fund managers being forced into it.
No.
Richard Branson actually trying to claim money from the government.
Well, exactly.
I think he sent a rocket up yesterday, didn't he? He can afford to do that, but you don't see him being forced into paying 30% of his earnings.
Well, no, he didn't.
So why should Wayne Rooney or anybody else?
Look, he didn't buy a British government to be told what to do, did he? Let's be honest.
That's very true. Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, if only the footballers had clubbed together and bought themselves an MP, they'd have been all right. But yeah, I think it's a contentious issue. But I just think it's unfair that they were singled out.
Absolutely, it's clickbait and it's stuff to get people to buy newspapers. There's no sense or fairness in it at all. And before any moron starts saying, well, what about nurses? Yeah, what about nurses? You elected a government that wanted to privatise the NHS. You got what you wanted.
You got what you wanted, yeah. Don't blame the footballers.
Yeah.
Don't blame the footballers. Blame yourself for that one. But the other point from that, for me anyway, is all this talk about how they can't afford Tottenham, Manchester United, Liverpool. Liverpool actually sacked, I think, 5 members of staff. They had to let them go. 3 referees and 2 VAR.
Oh, dear.
Had to take him off the payroll. However, there is talk about, this crisis, this lockdown, is going to affect teams and they're going to have no money. But I do think that if Manchester United and Liverpool and other teams like that cannot survive for 3 months, it wasn't much of an ongoing business or viable business in the first place then.
Well, absolutely. And the answer to that is yes, of course they can survive. There's, they might earn less money, but so what? They can ride it out. The teams down in the, whatever used to be called the 3rd division and the 4th division, they
1
can't.
and 2, yeah. The Barnsleys and Leyton Orients and Charltons of this world.
They cannot
afford it. Yeah, that is the problem for those clubs, obviously. Maybe the bigger clubs, and why should they? But should be helping those rather than helping themselves. It's also not true, unless I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. It's also not true that clubs are not earning, even though there is no income from people coming into the stadiums. People worldwide are still buying the football shirts. They're still clicking on stuff. There must be some income coming in, surely.
Yes, but it's very, very small. As a part of their total income, it's very, very small.
But yeah, they can really afford to pay the staff.
I mean, even the top clubs, it's sort of 20 million a year or something. It's not very much.
Not enough. But we shall see. Footballers, of course, people do like to kick them when they're down, But it's quite interesting having watched some of them how they've been keeping fit. As a Tottenham fan, they have a Zoom meeting every morning, and because they obviously these footballers, they've got their own gyms at home, and they have to be in front of the camera on a certain piece of apparatus at a certain time, and then the trainer takes them through their paces while he watches them all training at home on
what a good idea.
Big bank of screens. I think he has to go into the office, but huge bank of screens, and then he watches the players and says, right, 20 more sit-ups or whatever it is. He tells them, get on the bike, and he watches them training and gives them their instructions remotely.
Oh, good for them. What a good idea.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea, and I obviously imagine every single club has done the same.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see what the fitness levels are like when they come back.
Yeah, it will be interesting, won't it?
Harry Kane was out injured when this all started. Maybe he'll be fit to play now.
Well, yeah, but shouldn't his injury be carried over? You would have been out for that match, so you can't play.
You can't play. Well, that's another advantage. He's had 3 months to recover.
Yeah.
But then so have other injured players in other clubs, so I suppose it balances out. But under this system, this weighting average point system, Tottenham would finish either 8th or 9th, and Manchester United, in either scenario, would finish in the top 4. Not a great end of season for Tottenham. I don't think, depending on how we play our last remaining matches, but like West Ham, you say, they've got some easy games, quite a few home games. probably will survive the drop. But, the European place is going to be a bit different.
Yeah, and you've got to play the matches because it's the only way that is fair. It's a football competition that's supposed to last a season, 38 games. Let's play 38 games.
Yeah, I've toyed with the idea of just scrapping the whole season when this first started. I've just write off 2019, 2020, just write it all off and forget it ever happened. Because that would have been great for Tottenham, actually, and it would have given Jose Mourinho a fresh start. But the only other alternative, the serious alternative, is to play the games behind closed doors. That's got to be the only way, I suppose.
Well, I think so. Or you say the season is over, Liverpool won, which clearly they haven't done. There's no question of that. And no relegation. The promote two teams. Nobody gets relegated.
I'll say you'd still promote two teams.
Well, yeah. But
then what happens the next season? Would you relegate 5?
Maybe you relegate 3 for the next 2 seasons.
Okay. That would be interesting.
Why not?
But you're saying that as a West Ham fan so you don't go down.
Well, no, I just think it's the fair thing to do. Liverpool quite obviously have won the league. I mean, nobody can sensibly argue with that.
Yeah, and the FA and everybody else concerned will do whatever they can to make sure that gets over the line. I think they want to give that title to Liverpool. Been a long time in the waiting and all that. It would take an almighty, mighty slip up for them to lose it now.
They've earned it. They should have it.
What about Man City then? Banned from Europe or not banned from Europe? That'll affect things as well.
Well, I can't see how any European ban can take place now, can it?
Well, I don't know how that's going to work on.
No, I can't remember how it was going to work in the past because I don't think it was. They were going to appeal, weren't they?
Yeah, of course.
So that appeal has to be heard.
Yeah, and actually, I think the time for appeal has actually run out, hasn't it?
Is there? Well, I think they'd lodged the appeal. It's a question of when it will be heard, and is there enough time for it to be heard before UEFA have to, put the balls in the machine and draw them out?
Well, that's the other thing. If we're going to be starting in the middle of June and there's 8, 9, 10 games to play until the UEFA, the European places are decided, then they've actually got to have the draw. By the time they get to have the draw, will be something like a week after the games are supposed to have started.
Well, they usually start in July, and the qualification games for the Champions League start in July, don't they?
Exactly. We'll still be playing this season.
Yeah, and the UEFA Cup, of course.
Yeah.
They're called UEFA Cup now? What's it called now?
The
Vase.
The Vase, the Losers' Cup, the Runners-Up Cup, the Europa League. That's it.
That's
the Europa League.
Yeah.
But the Europa League starts in July. The qualification of the Champions League starts in July. We'll still be playing. So then that will start late as well. Keep going. I mean, I'm not worried, but I'm concerned that every single season for the next X amount of seasons, till it evens out, will finish and start late. They've got to get rid. That's what it is. They've got to get rid of the winter break.
Yeah,
haven't they? They've got to. It's a stupid idea in the first place.
It's a stupid idea. Yeah. Well, if you're going to have a break, have a break. 2 weeks, no football at all. Just have done with it. And if you're not going to do that, then don't bother. It's nonsense.
Yeah, it was kind of a something and nothing, wasn't it? It was either 5 games one week and 5 games the next. I mean, I don't think it made any difference anyway, and I think they'll have to scrap it this year because there'll be no time. There'll be no time, so they'll have to get rid of it.
Or they could get rid of the League Cup. Just say Premier League doesn't play in the League Cup.
That'd be a good idea.
Well, it should be because they're not members of the Football League anyway, are they?
Well, that's true, actually. Yeah, we've talked about getting rid of that cup. A lot of people have suggested it before.
Well, France has done it, and so next year there'll be no French league. So I think
that's right. Yeah.
I think England should follow suit, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, if the French can do it, why can't we? Why can't we?
Because we are the nasty English.
That's true, yeah. We're immune to everything and better than everybody else, yeah.
Indeed we are, yes.
Yeah.
No, we know much more than Johnny Foreigner.
Yeah. Oh, dear, yeah. Yes. Fog in the channel, Europe isolated.
Indeed. Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about our different ways to finish the league and stopping the league altogether. In Scotland, which you've been following, the gift that keeps on giving, football-wise.
Yeah. Well, they decided to cancel the league, so Celtic win the league, which
automatically.
Well, they were 13 points ahead with 8 games to play, so they were going to win it anyway. On 29th of December they were only 2 points ahead of Rangers, who had a game in hand. So since then they've pulled away. So Rangers weren't catching them. That wasn't going to happen. They're 13 points ahead with 8 games to play. They've won the league.
24 points available.
Yeah, so it's nobody sensibly can argue against that. But of course, Rangers fans, You can't put Rangers and sensible in the same sentence.
No.
Rangers fans have been burning up the internet saying how unfair it is, and Rangers went to court to try to force the season to carry on, and then it sparked a whole massive debate going back to the Rangers tax case.
Yeah, I was going to say Rangers should think themselves lucky to be where they are.
Well, absolutely. And the only, the Rangers fans have been saying the Scottish Inland Revenue. Well, I can't remember what they're called, but they've now dropped all those cases against Rangers, and these Rangers fans are saying, see, it shows it was all terrible, and they forced us out of business, etc., and there's nothing behind it. The reason that the Scottish Inland Revenue stopped the cases is that the companies that they were actually taking to court have been liquidated. They ceased to exist. So there's nobody to pay, even if they won, they won the £64 million tax which Rangers owe, there's nobody to pay it, so there's no point. And, this was financial dope on a huge scale back when it's year 2000 up to 2007. It was enormous. And to give you basically what it was all about was, instead of just paying players a salary, they split the salary into two. They had their employment contract registered with the Scottish FA that said you get £100,000 a week. Okay, so they lose 40,000 of that in tax, so they get net 60,000 a week. They had separate to that a side letter that said they were taking part in a trustee scheme whereby Rangers would loan them £80,000. Okay, and so the players then had to apply for a loan. The trustees would give the loan, and so this money would get paid. Now, this was fantastic for the players because it meant they got a big chunk of their money tax-free. It's a loan, so there's no tax attached. And Rangers, instead of having to pay, let's imagine it was 60,000 the player gets net. Rangers would actually have to pay the 40,000 to the Inland Revenue. But if it's 60 and it's a loan, they don't have to pay that 40, and that's where the 64 million comes from that the Scottish taxpayer, wants back. So it was an enormous scam. Except that it would have worked and it was legal if it had been played out like that. Unfortunately, the people in charge at Rangers then started writing in these letters that if you qualify for the Champions League, you get 25,000. If you go out of the group stage, it's 50,000, etc. So therefore, it's clearly associated with the performance. Therefore, it's a salary
rather than a
So they screwed up by not doing it properly, and they benefited from huge financial doping. No, Celtic couldn't compete with that sort of money. That you're paying the player. Celtic would have to pay £140,000 a week to a player. Rangers only had to pay 100, and the player got the same amount of money, and Rangers didn't have to pay the extra 40 to the Inland Revenue. So it's an enormous scam.
Yeah, that's quite shocking.
And that's why Rangers were bankrupted, went out of existence. They were replaced by another company, and then that company went bust, and the current company, which is called Sevco, is there, and they're whinging about how unfair it all is, when quite frankly, the only people that were disadvantaged was not Rangers or Rangers fans. It was every other supporter of every other football club in Scotland.
They fooled everybody with that. That's a scheme, that's a scam, quite clearly.
Well, very much so. And some amusing things did come out of it in the court case. Two managers of Premier League clubs at the time being paid one £30,000 and one £80,000 by Rangers at a time when they were not employed by Rangers.
There's nothing fair about that at all, is there? There's nothing correct about that. No. But Rangers are now complaining that Celtic have been handed the league, even though they were, as you say, 13 points clear and quite clearly going to win the title. Yeah,
and 11 of those 13 points have been earned since in this year, in 2020. Yeah. So Celtic have been pulling away.
They were on form. Basically,
they were going to win by more than 13 points. So, and it's a ninth title in a row. Neil Lennon's, I can't remember if it's third or fourth as manager of Celtic, but the football they played is the best football Celtic's played in many years.
Right, but at the other end of the scale, Hearts have been relegated, and they are going to sue.
Yes, well, they have to, don't they?
Yeah, as we were saying earlier, that's kind of what they have to do.
Yeah,
it's been unfair.
And if anyone thinks, they shouldn't. How many seasons has the relegation been decided in the final match of the season?
That's one of the reasons that everybody loves football, is that these great escapes that people pull off. And again, the season before Leicester City won the Premier League, they were in the relegation zone with 10 games to go, which is what we've got now.
Yes.
And then they went on a winning streak and won nearly all those games, and stayed up by the skin of their teeth, and then went on to win the title the next season.
Yeah.
So you've got every justification to say we might have pulled it off, because that's what happens in the last few games. All bets are off, everything changes, and teams start, those that have got the ability somewhere deep inside, somehow manage to pull themselves free. West Ham would do it nearly every season.
Oh, that's right. And then any football fan knows, just looking at their own team, every team except the top 3 or top 4 are very streaky. They have 4 or 5 matches on the trot where they're really good, and then they'll have 4 or 5 where they're really bad.
Yes.
You cannot say with 10 games to go who's going to go down.
No, you can't. And there do seem to be tendencies in football, so patterns, if you like. Nearly every year, Manchester United, in recent years at least, get off to a bad start. Nearly every year, the relegation is decided in the last few games, and the team that looked most likely to go down pulls it off and stays up somehow. Arsenal always have a wobble in February. All these things, there are obviously sort of patterns, and relegation to me is one of those, that those last 5 games or whatever, you cannot predict anything.
No, I think the only fair thing to do, and I think most football fans would agree this is fair, is to relegate Manchester United.
I would have suggested Arsenal, but I feel your sentiments. Yeah, that would be the only fair and correct. Give Liverpool a title. Nobody goes down apart from United and Arsenal.
Yeah.
But not just down a division. Just make it a couple.
Make it a couple. Yeah.
Couple. Why not? While we're at it.
Yeah, you think you're so good? Okay.
Yeah. Rangers did it. You can do it. All right. So that there is a lot of unsettled business as far as Scottish Premier League goes, as far as the football leagues in England go, because a lot of teams are going to suffer, like we said. And the teams, Liverpool, I don't think anybody's going to complain if Liverpool were handed a title without another ball being kicked.
No.
They've got to play the games because it's not fair on West Ham, Crystal Palace, Brighton, Bournemouth, Norwich and Aston Villa, to name the few that are in that relegation area.
I think also Liverpool would want to play the games. They'd rather win it on the pitch.
Yeah. I think it would not feel like because rival fans will always taunt them that you won 3/4 of a season.
Yeah, I mean, the most vocal people saying Liverpool should be given it now are Manchester United fans, just so they can say that.
Yeah, because it'll never be a proper title.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, but let's hope they play the game. They'll have to play the games as quickly as they can in quick succession. I don't know how they'll do it. I don't suppose just an idea. There'll be no travelling fans, so there's no logistics to worry about in that sense. Maybe they could, play, instead of having all the games Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, they could maybe play them in quicker succession.
Yeah, that's very difficult. It's the liaison with the police authorities that's the difficult bit with that. Can the police? Well, mind you, if there's no fans going,
that's my
so
point.
Yeah. Problem, or they could go to St George's Park or whatever it's called.
Yes.
The FA Centre, where they got lots of pitches. Just have a tournament over the weekend.
Yes, well, there was a suggestion.
Play 6 aside, playing
6 aside for the title.
15 minutes each side.
Yeah. 3 and in for the title.
Yeah, exactly.
But they will suggest that they could do it on the training pitches, which I think it's better to do it in the stadiums.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, there was, just before we finish off, there was one point about that. Somebody said it's better at training pitches because fans will turn up at the stadiums anyway. And then other people said, why should they? But if you look at some of the Champions League games, just before we went to this enforced break, there were thousands of fans gathering outside, I think it was in Italy, gathering outside a Champions League game in Italy because they couldn't go inside, and chanting from without. I don't think that'll happen in England, though. Not because it's England, but I think there's too many games to get through. It'll be a bit of a bind to travel to all those games.
Okay, so you would need some sort of police presence in case that happened, and if anybody did it, they're clearly breaking the law, so the police probably won't.
Yeah, or they just happened to be passing the stadium because they went there to test their eyesight while driving.
Testing their eyesight, of course, I forgot about that. It's very important, though.
Yes.
Important.
Get in your car.
You have to get in your car to test your eyesight.
Yes.
And you can't just do it in 5 minutes. It's got to be 284-mile trip.
Yes, you can't drive round and around Daddy's estate. No. All right, that's just about all we've got time for this week. I don't know when we'll be back with this. Definitely once the Premier League starts again.
Well, yeah, we're in the wind up towards the Premier League, so we'll be back again next week with whatever the news is.
Yeah.
because it's changing day by day as people.
Maybe next week we'll know some more, or some less.
Or some less, yeah.
Yes. But let's wind up with the question and answer, your trivia question for this week on Hitting the Bar.
Right, the question was, since 1964-65 season in the Dutch, what is now Premier League, Eredivisie, every winner has had the same thing in common. They have all worn red shirts.
That's incredible. I mean, we did discuss this. Red is a popular colour.
Yeah.
But that is quite a high statistic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's the predominant colour in the shirt, and
yes,
and the top six when the Dutch season finished this season all had red as the predominant colour in it.
Unbelievable. I mean, Ajax, of course, have won it so many times and have got red in it. But
PSV,
yeah,
all red.
All red. There we are. That's the answer to this week's trivia question. We'll be back with more Hitting the Bar very shortly. I'm Chris Karle.
I'm Geoff Saunders.
And that was Hitting the Bar, the football podcast.